This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. Whether you need a domain, website, or online store, make your next move with Squarespace. About a month back, I released the first of a series of videos showing you how I go about retouching the portraits that I shoot. And in that video, I showed you my process for retouching skin in a way that felt very natural and still kept all the texture in place. In this video, which will be the second in this series, I want to talk about how I enhance and lift my subject's eyes in my portraits. And eyes for me are probably the single most important feature on my subject's face because they create that connection between the person viewing the photograph and the person who sat in front of my camera. And I'm making sure that when I light portraits like this on the day that I'm paying special attention to the eyes, that I want to fill them with light, that I want you to be drawn to the eyes of my subjects, that I want to flood the bottom iris with a lot of light so it makes the color pop, and put that little life-infusing catch light in the top quadrant of the eye. But then there's a series of things that I'm doing in post to enhance the lighting that I've used on the day and to make sure that you're definitely drawn into the eyes of my portraits first. And let me say before I share these techniques with you that this is a technique that can and often is overused by a lot of people. These techniques I'm going to show you should still be used very lightly because you don't want the eyes to pop out of the face so much that they don't look like they belong anymore. You've turned your subject into strange looking cat people because you push the techniques too hard. At the end of the day, you just want that slight lift, that slight enhancement that makes sure that your viewer goes to your subject's eyes and you create that connection. But the whole image should still feel very natural and you shouldn't be able to see the editing that you've done. Hopefully for the portrait photographers amongst you, you'll pick up some great tips in this video that you'll be able to use in your own work. But even if you're not a portrait photographer, I hope that by following along with this tutorial or any of the others in the series, you're going to pick up some tips and tricks and techniques that you can use in Photoshop no matter what your genre of photography. So let's get started on today's topic, which is enhancing the eyes in your portraits.
So the first thing that we're going to do is take care of some of the veins in the eyes. Everyone's eyes have veins. It's completely normal. So I don't want to remove all the veins. I just want to take out the most distracting of those veins. And for that, I use a very simple trick. So I'm going to zoom in on this left eye here. And I'm going to come down here to the bottom. I'm going to create a blank layer above my background layer. And here I'm going to take care of the veins. So I'm going to come up here to my spot healing brush, select that, and make sure that my brush is nice and soft, 0% hardness, content aware is selected, and sample all layers is selected so that it's reading the information on the layer below. And the last thing I'm going to do, and this is the trick that's useful, is I'm going to come here to mode and I'm going to change this to lighten. And what lighten does is it says that you want to heal only darker things in your picture. So if I left it on normal, what Photoshop would do is it would try and read the whole area, the lights, the darks, and the everything, and take out anything that it thinks should be removed. But if I select darken, for example, it would be looking for light things in the image that it wants to take out but leave the dark elements. But because the veins are darker than the whites of the eyes, if I change this to lighten, it means that what it's going to do is just look at the darker things in the image and only take those out and leave the lighter areas. So now if I just change my brush with my square bracket key to the right size of the vein, just slightly larger because it's a soft brush, and I just brush like this, it's going to remove those veins. Again, just the darker areas in the picture, not the lighter areas, which is a really useful feature. So it should be maintaining those whites as they are. I don't want to go all the way to the edge because there should be veins in the corner of eyes. I don't want to make them look unnaturally white or perfect. I just want to take out the most distracting. So if I turn this on and off, you can see it's just taken out those more distracting veins and cleaned it up a little bit, but it still looks very, very natural. And I'm going to do the same with the other eye as well. Again, so zooming out, that looks pretty good to me. If I turn this layer on and off, I've just taken out the most distracting of those veins, but still kept them looking natural. There should be veins in eyes. We don't want to remove everything. The next 4 layers I'm going to create are just going to start to shape a little bit of light in there and make the eye itself pop. So the first thing I'm going to do is adjustment layer at the bottom here and create a new curves layer above. I'm going to change the blending mode of the curve layer to screen, which is going to brighten that whole image up. And then with the mask selected, I'm going to hit Control or Command I on a Mac to fill that layer with black and get rid of the effect. I'm going to grab my brush tool and I'm going to brush this effect back in subtly on that mask. So with my brush, very, very soft, so 0% hardness, 3% flow, so I can slowly brush this effect in. I don't want to zoom in too close this time. I want to keep some context when I do this. And I'm looking for the light that's in the eye naturally. This is really, really important. You can't just copy what I'm going to do, because if I was side lighting this, I would need to make slightly different moves. But you can see the beauty dish, or the softbox that I was using on this occasion, is overhead. So that means the light is going to pool in the bottom of the eye because the lid is going to create a bit of a shade. So I'm just going to, with my square bracket key, bring my brush size up a little bit. I'm going to make just a very little sweep along the bottom there with the whites of the eyes, just on the bottom. Just 2 little strokes like that at 3%. So it's very, very little. If I turn this on and off, you can see all it's done is just brought a little bit of light into the bottom of those eyes. And then I'm going to hit X, which is going to flip my brush to black. And because I don't want it really on these rims here, I'm going to paint this effect out with that black on the mask, just on these lids below, just to make sure that it's only the eyeball that I'm affecting. So if I turn that on and off now, you can see it's just brightening the lower half of that eyeball with that sweep. Next thing I'm going to do is another adjustment layer, a curves layer again. This time I'm going to use the color dodge tool. This is the tool I can't stress enough. You need to use incredibly lightly and gently, because this is the one you're going to be tempted to overdo. Okay, so it looks really crazy. I'm going to hit Control or Command I on a Mac to fill that layer with black. Come here and select my brush, hit X to flip and make sure that I'm back on white, because I'm going to paint this effect in. Again, exactly the same, soft brush, 3% flow. I'm going to zoom in on this left eye here. Now what I'm doing on this occasion, I'm going to bring my brush size right down. I'm going to accentuate the fans in the iris. And this is both brightening and kind of dodging, bringing that saturation through for the color as well. And I'm just going to paint in and follow the kind of fans of the iris as they move out. You can see the kind of natural shape in there with those. So I'm basically taking the eye that she already has. I'm not creating something new. I'm just painting it in as if the light was really catching those areas strongly. And that looks okay to me. It's way too strong, this effect at the moment, but I will show you. We'll just dial that back down, the opacity. I'm going to do the same with this eye on the right. All right, so you can see that looks just way too crazy. It's too strong, it's too much. She's starting to look fake. So all I'm going to do is come over here to opacity. I'm going to dial this right down to 0. And I'm just going to slowly start to bring it up, work out kind of where it is really making those irises pop a little bit more, but it still looks natural. And to me, that looks pretty good. Again, less is more. I can't stress it enough. And then I'm going to come down to the bottom here, adjustment layer, another curves layer, and this time I'm going to do another screen layer to do a little bit of dodging. I'm going to apply that and hit Control I to fill it with black. And this is going to lighten the iris. And again, I don't want to lighten the whole iris. I just want to lighten where I think, because that light is overhead, where that light should be pooling naturally in that iris. I'm going to change my brush size to roughly the size of that sort of center band of that iris, and just do 1 or 2 little sweeps across the bottom where that light should be pooling naturally. Just like that. And that is enough. If I zoom back out, turn this on and off, you can see that should just be making that light pool in the bottom. Again, it might be a little bit too strong, so I'm going to dial that back. Then the last stage is just to create another curves layer. This time I'm going to change my blending mode on that curves layer to multiply, which darkens the whole image. Control or Command I to fill that layer with black. And now I'm going to mask it in again with my brush. So white on the brush, soft brush, 3% flow. And this time I'm going to come into my iris and I'm going to start to paint around the outside of the iris. You'll notice if you look at eyes very carefully that you usually have a dark band around the outside of the iris. And if we just darken that down a little bit, it's going to make the inside of the iris pop a little bit more and give it definition. So that's the left eye, and it's going to do the same on the right. Just darkening down the outside of that iris. Everyone's got this kind of slightly darker ring before you hit the white of the eye. And if I zoom back out, you can see if I turn that on and off, it's just given that little bit of definition. Again, slightly too strong. So I'm going to come here and take this down a little bit. Less is more. And now what I would suggest you do is take these 4 curves layers and select them all just by holding Shift and clicking the bottom one here. Right click and go Group from Layers. Put these all together as the light shaping layers in this image. So this bottom layer, remember, is just us cleaning up our veins. Turn that on and off and see how much of an effect it's having. It's having quite a strong effect. And again, now just with the opacity on this group, we can dial that in as much as we want. So that's the eyes as they were shot, no editing. And I can just start to bring the light up and just make them pop a little bit. I would say I probably want that on about 67% in this case. So turning it on, off and on here, you can see that looks natural to me. It doesn't look fake. She already has quite amazing eyes that pop on their own, and that's just giving them a little tiny lift, and less is definitely more. In fact, looking at it when I zoom out, and this is often a good thing to do, it's still slightly too strong, so I might take it to around 50. And let's turn that off and on, and that looks good. Zoom in, off and on. So with those layers, just that layer 1 and those 4 layers of curves with dodging and burning and color burning, we've actually taken the eyes in the image, which were already great, and just given that little bit of lift so the viewer can connect with this portrait.
So I hope this has helped, and I'm going to say this one more time. With these techniques, less is definitely more. And if you're worried you might be overusing this technique or pushing it too far, I would recommend doing a few edits on some portraits and then leaving them, save them, go away for a few days, and then come back 3 or 4 days later or a week or 2 weeks later and then take a more objective look at what you've done and ask yourself honestly, does your edit look natural? Or are those eyes starting to bug out of the face and looking unnatural? Because you still want your portrait to feel natural and realistic, and you just want that subtle lift. And another thing to do is to find those friends of yours who are willing to be honest, who will give you the brutal truth. Send them the portraits before you share them with the world, and get them to look at them and ask them honestly, does this look like a natural, well-lit portrait, or are there things that stand out and look unnatural? Less is definitely more. We've covered natural skin retouching and today enhancing and lifting eyes. Still to come in this series, I want to talk to you about shaping light on a face using dodge and burn, replacing background textures and colors to make your subject stand out from the background more. And I want to finish up with a video on how do you finish the image with color, contrast and sharpening. So keep an eye out for those. Make sure you subscribe below. It should come through. And if you hit that little bell icon, sometimes YouTube lets you know about it, fingers crossed. And then just a little bit of housekeeping, just to remind you that Collection 5 is now out for sale on my website. These are limited edition every year, so once they're gone, they're gone. I think already about half have gone since a couple of weeks ago. Just to let you know, inside there are 45 color images, 45 black and white from last year, and some quotes from some of the videos from the same year in there as well. And also the Meaning in the Making is still for sale. These aren't limited edition. They should be available anywhere that you normally buy books online. There is the English version. There's now also the German version, which is out and available for sale in Germany. And also, because you asked, I have also produced for you an audiobook version, which I've read myself. That is only available for sale on my website. I will put links for all these things down below. And just a reminder to those of you who have read The Meaning in the Making and you've enjoyed it and you want to help me spread that book around, obviously please recommend it to friends and family. But one of the biggest ways you can help me is to remember to go back to where you bought it online, leave a rating and a review. It really, really helps to spread the word about the book. And thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you need a new website or a domain, they're a fantastic option. I've used them myself as my website of choice for all my work online for over a decade now. One of the great things about Squarespace is that I'm able to sell products from my website. You've heard me say that I've got Collection 5 available on my website and I've got my audiobook. That kind of stuff is really intimidating to me. I don't know how to code. And when I first started doing this, I thought payments would be very complicated, but it couldn't have been easier. Setting up my store took 10 minutes at most. I was able to add products, set prices, put photos up, put a description, and then when all the orders come in, I can see where they're coming from, send people their tracking numbers once the item is shipped, and then I can see reports for how things are actually selling and how they're doing, and it couldn't be simpler. Start your free trial today at squarespace.com and go to squarespace.com/Sean Tucker to get 10% off your first purchase.